I'm Amanda Knox, and you're listening to Hard Knocks. Welcome to Ask Amanda Anything, where you can literally ask me anything. Obviously, subscribers get priority, but yeah, Chris will be here to read your questions and comments submitted through the website or through our Substack, and I will tackle them head on.
And as you know, I will playfully poke, prod, and challenge Amanda to try to draw out her best answers. Are you ready, Amanda?
Ready. Ready as I'll ever be.
It's usually pretty ready.
Yes, it's been quite the last few weeks where I'm pretty, you know what? It's going to be an interesting Ask Me Anything, because who knows what's going to come out of my very tired and dazed state.
Just for context here, the Hulu show we've been executive producing about Amanda's wrongful conviction and journey to find freedom in the aftermath is coming out on August 20th, and we have been in the mad dash to the finish line. Amanda has been doing nonstop press. We've been flying all over across the country and are running on no sleep with way too many unanswered emails and still trying to find time to do this and talk to you. So we're feeling a little at our wits' end. We're trying to have micro moments of meditation whenever we can to center ourselves and not be at each other's throats. And we're mostly succeeding. So
nice.
I think we're going to start it off with an easy, light question from Jenna. I was recently called for jury duty. Sorry, it's not light. Something I have wanted to do for a long time out of curiosity and a sense of civic duty. I didn't end up getting selected, but got a little taste of the procedures and constraints jurors are under. Do you have any advice for all the potential jurors out there? How would you feel about serving on a jury panel?
That's a great question. And bravo, Jenna, for thinking of it as a civic duty, because it is. And even the word duty, I'm just thinking of this Wreck-It Ralph and how the character was like, duty. It just has like a bad connotation to it. But yes, like most of us out there would rather not be on a jury because it is a sudden and unplanned withdrawal of you from your plans and your self-interest. And for those of us who don't have, traditional jobs, it means that we are suddenly faced with the prospect of losing work and losing pay. And so I think that our jury system is not really set up in this country to reward people for taking part in the process and performing their civic duty. So bravo, Jenna, for, despite all of those obstacles, feeling that way. Chris and I have debated about jury before and what it means to be a juror. And I think, again, one of the unfortunate realities of our jury system is that the selection process selects for those of us who have the least amount of stakes or interest or knowledge about the legal and judicial process to be the ones who are judging that legal and judicial process, as if that makes a person objective, when in fact it just makes them
ignorant
and therefore biased in a different way than you might otherwise be. So, for example, I've been called for jury duty a number of times since coming back from my own ordeal, and I've never been selected, precisely because I have an informed opinion. And
what they would say on the other side, the prosecutor who's like striking you for cause or using their free challenges to get rid of you, would say like, oh, well, do you know someone who's been a victim of violent crime? Hand goes up. Yes. Have you experienced any, misconduct by police? Hand goes up, right? they would say, well, how are you supposed to be objective about weighing, a case with a violent crime when you might be emotionally triggered or reacting because of your own
I
experience
think
with
that,
this?
and my counter argument is those of us who have not been victims of violent crime or police misconduct are also going to feel emotionally triggered by those same things. Like anybody is going to be emotionally triggered. It's just in what direction are they going to be emotionally triggered? I think that one of the things that I also, so I think there is, in terms of what I would say to a potential juror, obviously, do not lie. Do not, like, if you're a victim of police misconduct, don't lie and say that you weren't a victim of police misconduct if, like, they directly ask you the question. That said, if no one directly asks you the question, maybe don't offer up the information. Especially if you do want to be a part of a jury. But I think the more important thing is, one thing that Chris and I have discussed in the past is how we wish, like, an alternative version of the jury system is one in which that civic duty is kind of like a draft. And every single citizen at some point in their life will devote 2 years of their life to being a jury member. And they are a jury member for however many trials will take place over the course of 2 years. And starting that 2-year process is like 3 months of training where you get training in the law, you get training in, police procedure, you get training in psychology classes, like
Cognitive
all of that
bias,
to help
forensics, all
cognitive
kinds of
bias,
things.
all
Yeah.
these things that should inform your opinion ultimately on the legal, verdict in a case.
And maybe it's not 2 years, maybe it's 1 year, like maybe the training
Sure.
is, like, these things are all under debate, but I think the central
Negotiable,
premise is,
sure. But the central premise is that you should be trained and informed, yes. And I think that what we as potential jurors can do is when we get the call, like, I'm not saying that we should all just like drop what we're doing and go and take a criminology class at a university. What I am saying, though, is that when we get the call, typically it's like weeks and weeks ahead of when you might be selected for said jury. And in that meantime, really devote yourself to some online resources that might inform you as a jury member so that you can make a better decision and perform your civic duty correctly. Like, I think it's crazy that the one civic duty that we have to perform, that is like a sacred duty, relies upon our ignorance as opposed to training. Like every other civic duty, like if you become a member of the army, they don't just throw you on the battlefield, like you go through training. And I feel like being a jury jury member should be the exact same thing. And you know what it occurs to me now is that what we should do is, first of all, we should do a podcast series about like bringing together the kinds of people and information that jury members should have in mind. So like say, you get called to be a jury member, something that we should work on and put out on our Substack and on our website is, so you're going to be a jury member. Here's what you got to know. And so I'll do that. I think I'll put that on the list of things that we should do. I think that would be a very useful.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, what it is now, if you haven't been a jury member, I was recently, a year or two ago, called and had to go in for the selection process. And, what they do is they give you a 2-minute, 5-minute maybe introduction to concepts like burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. There's these various different evidentiary standards that you have to weigh as a juror. And they're nuanced concepts. What is a reasonable person? Right? Like that, there are volumes and volumes of of legal writing on what a reasonable person is and what the reasonable person standard in the law means.
Right. And it's not necessarily the common sense definition, right? Like that's what's so infuriating. And if you know a person who is deeply embedded in the law, you know how infuriating it is to talk to them, because like certain concepts that have a certain meaning, like just common sense, or, like reasonable doubt, the word reasonable, like these are normal everyday terms that we use on an everyday basis. And then they are it's like legal language is a completely different language with a completely different set of standards and definitions of what a thing means. And it's all like insulary, like it's a feedback loop of definition making. And so really untangling all of those things requires careful consideration and honestly, like, again, a whole podcast series unpacking it for the layman, because you shouldn't have to go to 4 years of law school just to understand what reasonable doubt means. Like, it really is insane. And yet here we are.
I mean, the system that we're proposing here is a middle ground between the lay juror, which is what we have, and the professional juror, which is something that exists in other countries. There are places that do professional jury members, right?
Where is that?
The downside of the professional juror is that it's not just your peers. It's this class of people who take the job of becoming jury members, right? And the draft model is something where it's like everyone's going to have that job at some point in their life, and you might not get called until you're 60 because you want old people on the jury, right? You might get called when you're 18, somewhere in there, you're going to do your tour of duty as a jury member. If this is never going to happen, but
this is never going to happen. But
a boy can dream.
Yes, the idea is that marriage between your peers, the jury member could be anyone who could be your peer, and they are a peer who is informed in order to make an appropriate legal decision.
And if you only do one trial at a time, right, it's like, you also learn from doing it once and doing it twice. And so like, even if you didn't have training, just the fact that you would do 10 trials or 30 trials in your term instead of one would make you a better juror, right? So
I think it would be also, I wish that it was more possible for jury members to anonymously talk in the aftermath about what the process of determining a verdict was like for them personally. And I mean, there's that incredible series where they did a mock jury, but the people who were brought in didn't know that they were real. What was that show? Do you know what I'm talking about? That show where
I know about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so like just like what that psychological process is like when you're in a room full of personalities who all have their own context and motivations and breaking points. Like that, it's very interesting to me that there isn't more transparency around that, because, and you know what, another thing that I think that would be incredible for our system that Italy does that we do not do here is motivating verdicts. So again, like juries here don't have to explain why they came to a certain verdict. It's you're sort of left to the judge, and future lawyers are sort of left to guess that one piece of evidence was super convincing versus another. And in Italy, that is very spelled out. The judge who plays a role in the decision-making process takes what was conferred and agreed upon in the Camera di Consiglio, or the chambers, and then writes a written document going through all the evidence step by step and explaining why they came to the decision that they came to. And I feel like that is woefully, that is like a really necessary process so that so that there is like faith in the judicial process and the ability to appeal within reason to
it gives you something
outcome.
to hook onto, right? It gives you an argument to say, well, that argument isn't sound, or this piece is predicated on some information we later discovered was false, etc. And we do that in the U.S. at the Supreme Court level, right? The Supreme Court often, although not always, is writing an opinion about why they ruled the way they did. And that is used when people then try to challenge something, right? At the lower courts as well, the opinions do that. One little pro tip for you, if you do want to get out of jury duty, is just say that you're a fan of Amanda Knox. Because I'll tell you, the last time that I was called for jury duty, I didn't say Amanda's my husband, but,
I'm Amanda's husband.
Oh, I'm
mean.
Amanda's husband. Yeah.
You're tired too.
Brain dead we are. Hey, it's 2025. It takes all kinds, right? So they asked me, or they asked the available jury people, like, if you didn't witness something yourself, like, how would you know if it was true or not? Actually, the first thing they said was, how do you know if something is true? And this is the prosecutor, and people in the jury pool are like raising their hands, and someone's like, well, if I saw it with my own eyes. And they're like, great, yes, eyewitness. If you saw it with your own eyes, you'd know it's true. Well, what if you didn't see it with your own eyes? Then how would you know? And then, people were like, And the prosecutor said, well, maybe someone told you. A witness saw it. You heard someone report it. Now, would you trust any witness? Well, what about someone like a police officer, right? And so the thing she was trying to lead up to was, hey, I have this. It was a DUI case, and someone was accused of being on meth while driving. And the only evidence, there was no blood,
there was no physical evidence.
Of drugs. Yeah. Never found any drugs. The only evidence was that the officer said this person was behaving erratically when pulled over. And the defense attorney's argument was, has anyone ever seen Seinfeld? The character Kramer? And I'm like, yeah, I know Kramer. And he's like, some people are just kooky, and that's my client, just a kooky, zany woman. And the prosecutor's like, this person is acting erratically, like they're on drugs, and you need to trust the testimony of this officer who witnessed that behavior. And so they asked, would you trust a police officer's, witnessing of something? And I couldn't help myself. But because I know about this stuff, I raised my hand and I had to say, well, actually, there's lots of psychological studies show that eyewitness testimony is very unreliable, and it's a major contributing factor to wrongful convictions. And in fact, authority figures aren't any better at recalling or things accurately, and their eyewitness testimony is just as liable to be wrong as the layperson's. But unfortunately, they are more likely to judge their confidence to be higher, even though they're not better at being an eyewitness or at detecting deception, for instance.
And then the prosecutor was like, thank you, goodbye. So if you cite any of the things that you learn from this podcast, you will probably get dismissed as a jury member, which
but
is,
I also
again,
felt like
unfortunate.
What I knew that was going to get me booted from the jury pool, but I also knew that I was putting something on the table there that would affect the rest of the jury pool. And because I can't bring my own knowledge in there and be honest, I could have lied or hidden that information, But now everyone else there in the potential jury pool knows that there's research out there that says that eyewitness testimony is not reliable. So anyway.
Yeah, or they're like, who's this Kramer lover?
I know. We're going to move on to something a little sillier. What is your absolute to die for favorite meal or food, dessert, and beverage?
This is very, very easy. Sushi is my absolute favorite, without a doubt, 100% favorite food. And by sushi, I mean sashimi most of the time. So anytime that I have the choice to go out to a restaurant, I choose sushi. It is just, I could
Even
eat
if you
it
had
every
it
day.
for lunch.
Yes, every day, every meal, I'm good. Omakase tends to be my jam, which is typically a meal that is comprised of nigiri, which are the little logs of rice with the raw fish on top. or sashimi, which is just straight raw fish. And I am.
And that means chef choice if you don't know that
Yes,
term.
omakase means chef choice. So it means that you just sort of show up. You don't even order what you want. You just trust the chef and they deliver to you what they think are the best cuts. And it's delicious. Mwah. It feels good. It tastes good. It makes you feel good after you eat it.
It's healthy.
It's healthy. I love it. It's my favorite.
And there's no
dessert.
decision. There's no analysis paralysis, right? Like it's nice when you do omakase that you just
trust.
Put it in their hands.
I love trusting artists. Like I love, or for this, another good example of this is I hate doing my own makeup. I love when professional makeup artists do my makeup because one, it feels like I'm getting licked by a teddy bear, but two, because this is their art. They know what they're doing. And I can just sit back and like receive the fruits of their knowledge and labor and appreciate. Like this, I love just appreciating another person's genius and talent. And so that's what I experience when I go to omakase is just like this person knows the fish. He knows how to cut them. Like he knows how to deliver them to me. And I am a happy camper.
And especially sitting at the sushi bar, sitting at the counter where the person preparing your fish is just right there, feet away from you, and can hear the sounds you're making of ecstasy after you take a bite.
Yeah,
you know?
so I'm very shameless about the happy noises that I make when I eat sushi. And it's in part because I know that if the sushi chef can hear me, he's just like, yeah. And then there's another part of me that's just like, I can't even hold it back. Like, it's like this moan of pleasure that escapes me and is just part of the dance in the way that like,
for anyone just tuning in, we're talking
is.
about sushi, not something else.
Okay. So dessert, that is a more tricky question because I am not a sweets person. I could probably go my entire life and never have a cookie again, a cake again, ice cream again. Like I really could take it or leave it. And
what about an 85 dark chocolate?
Even that, like I could probably go my whole life without eating 85% dark chocolate. It's not the thing that I feel like I would just die without. Whereas if someone told me I couldn't eat sushi anymore, I would be devastated. That said,
what about like fresh mango? Does that count?
I don't think that counts, but I'm getting there.
Okay, all right.
So the thing that I like is things like that. Like for me, ecstasy in the sweet realm takes the flavor or takes the form of fresh fruit. So a fresh kiwi, fresh champagne mango, fresh raspberries, like all of these things I really, really savor and I enjoy. But I don't usually eat them as dessert. I eat them as like snacks throughout the day. So take that for what it is. And then drink was the question.
Yeah. Beverage.
My favorite beverage. So my favorite alcoholic beverage is a Last Word. It's a cocktail that most places can't make, but when they do, I always ask. And it's always very exciting when they do. My favorite
it's gin, green chartreuse, maraschino, and lime juice.
Right. It's very crisp, refreshing. It has some depth. There's like a slight sweetness from the cherry, but it's very like it's not super sweet. I really like it. My favorite non-alcoholic drink besides water, because water is just so freaking refreshing, is matcha latte. I really like matcha lattes.
Okay. Moving on. This comes from Karen. I was curious whether Amanda listened to the judge's speech about Brian Koberger, where he goes on about how he's inhuman and there's nothing good about him. I enjoy your content when you're discussing the constraints of free will. Of course, his crime was horrendous, but obviously it's some type of illness or disconnection from empathy. When a judge speaks like this, like the Larry Nassar judge, it's like they want to appeal to the angry public. But who is a judge even to judge someone's soul? I don't mean it in a religious sense, like judges should hand down sentences and that's it. Don't know if it's meant to be a deterrent to other would-be murderers to curtail their fantasy of glory, but it seems so myopic.
Yeah. So this is in reference, I believe, to the Atlantic article that I wrote recently called What is Evil, where I discussed some of the responses that I saw to the Idaho student killings that took place. And for the record of all or for those who don't know, this is one of those like cases where the person who committed this crime is clearly this case is like so deeply disturbing because these kids were asleep in their beds. They had no connection to this person who just targeted them after having like studied serial killers and like meticulously came up with this plan to stab these poor kids to death in their beds and then tried to get away with it by like getting rid of the evidence. So like a person who was very within their like very conscious and present in their decision making to commit this like horrific act. And so there was a lot of discussion on the other side of it once he had been apprehended and identified, but also once he had pled guilty and admitted to having committed these crimes, of people being interested in like, oh my God, why would this person do that? And the reaction was, well, he's evil. And so I was trying to like address this question of what do we mean when we say he's evil? Like, what does that mean? And is it a good thing for us to label people as evil? And the ultimate sort of takeaway that I was offering to those who were reading was that we use the term evil as this sort of catch-all term to describe something that we do not understand, but that we also hate. And then as a result, we feel sort of righteously justified to indulge in our own non-empathetic, even I would argue psychopathic tendency to make this person who we have labeled evil suffer just for the sake of suffering as retribution for their terrible crime. And which isn't to dismiss, the horribleness of the crime, but it is a sort of soul searching that I was suggesting that we should all do. And it was also a sort of invitation to imagine that this person is, dangerous and unfit to just exist in society the way that he, has proven himself to be unfit to exist within our society, and therefore should absolutely be detained and probably for the rest of his life, because who's to say that there's any way to cure this kind of whatever mental illness this person has. But like ultimately, I think that I think of it in terms of a mental illness, of a brokenness about him, rather than as a moral judgment of him. And that isn't to say that there isn't a moral distinction between someone who literally doesn't know what reality is, like the kind of mentally ill person who murders somebody because they're convinced that they're an alien because the aliens were telling them that they're an alien. There's actual, literal mental illness that can impact a person's decision making that is different than the kind of mental illness that Kohlberger seems to have enacted because he has no, he doesn't have crazy voices speaking it. He seemed to be very grounded in reality and grounded in his decision making, very purposeful and intentional. And I was arguing that even the impulse to intentionally kill someone, to me, is a sign of a kind of brokenness or mental illness, and it's just one that we do not understand. And I worry that when we label something like that as evil, we are going out of our way to not understand it. We are not investigating it further. We are instead using that as a means to allow ourselves to have a non-empathetic and harmful response to that individual. So then, on top of that, to hear a judge, and I find it super interesting that they brought up the same judge who judged Larry Nassar, because I will never forget seeing how this female judge, she at some point, I believe there was like some kind of statement that was on behalf of like Larry Nassar's defense or something. And it was not like Larry Nassar's defense attorneys did not argue that he wasn't guilty of these crimes. Like, he pled guilty. And yet there was just this like dismissiveness and disgust with which the judge like was just incapable of accepting any kind of contextualization of this human being. Like, no, you are disgusting. You are less than human. And you could tell that like that judge in particular was very filled up with a kind of self-righteous like eagerness to administer institutional suffering on this human being who was in front of her. And I feel like that's a similar vibe that we're getting from this judge who studied Kohlberger, where he's just pronouncing these ideas about this human being that he is absolutely not qualified to pronounce. Like, he is not, this judge is not a psychologist. He is not a priest. He is not like, and I think that I worry when judges do things like that, because I feel like they are going far above and beyond their role in the justice system, and they're almost and I think that it builds them up towards a mindset that is very dangerous, because it means that they are feeling like they, in their role as a judge and a presider over a legal proceeding, is like a deeply felt experience that can be informed by gut reactions to that proceeding, as opposed to the intellectual exercise of carrying out the legal proceeding. But at the same time, I want to like flip that and argue the opposite a little bit, because I've also seen judges who, when they have overturned a wrongful conviction, say, or have like done the who have like awarded a certificate of innocence to a person who has spent 20 years trying to prove their innocence, or awarded compensation. Like, very often those judges too are not limiting themselves to exercising their role over the legal proceedings. Like, they are expressing. Yeah, they get emotional, and like it's very emotional to like it's very moving to see that like a judge cares about the person that they are administering justice over. Like, it sort of grounds us in their ability to empathize with humans. And I think the one difference, or another example, I had a really interesting experience recently where a friend of mine adopted a kid, and I I took part in I was on Zoom, but like I was there sort of like on the Zoom of family and friends who were there to watch over and witness the proceeding, which was a legal proceeding. It's where the judge says, okay, here are all your documents. You are now officially the parents of this kid. And like, it really meant a lot that the judge didn't just, say, okay, boxes checked, okay, we're done. The judge recognized that this was a momentous moment in these people's lives, and he really embraced, and he was very like sweet about being like, clearly you two like love and are devoted to this child, and he is lucky to have you as parents. And so it is my honor to present to you the official, ruling that announces you. And I'm like getting emotional thinking about it. And so it's like, I think that when the judicial exercise of a legal proceeding leads you to have empathy for the people that you are pronouncing something over, like, I don't want to push back against that. I guess the thing that I'm afraid of is that, so often in these criminal court proceedings, it's not limited to a cold and solemn. Like, I'm okay with cold and solemn and detached. I don't love to see my judges expressing vitriol and hatred over a person, even when they've committed a horrible crime.
That you have the sort of careful legal analysis, the best attempt at objectivity, and then you have compassion and empathy, right, as one side of this emotional spectrum. And you want to create a window to allow compassion and empathy through. And you want to create a door to block whatever feelings of vitriol or rage or hatred might arise. And I think that's a lot like being a parent, honestly. Like when your child does something inappropriate, when they behave in a way you don't want them to behave, or that isn't kind to other people, you feel lots of emotions. You might feel a flash of anger at them. Your job as a good parent is to like quell that flash of anger and not yell at them, and to express empathy and compassion for them, even as you don't let them off the hook, even as you find an appropriate consequence for what their behavior was, and find a way to help them learn how to become better and to exhibit better behaviors in the future, right? So compassion has a role to play in helping rehabilitate people, and helping steer behavior. And
or
the
even
way
in
I
just
think about,
like if the consequence is we're not going to really rehabilitate. Like, I think one of the things we have to acknowledge is that there are certain situations where we're not going to rehabilitate the person. We do not have the ability, at least to this day, we do not have the ability to cure psychopaths of their psychopathy.
You should still have compassion,
right?
though, right?
But like, I think that the sacred duty of removing a dangerous human being from society should be considered and expressed in a sort of sacred and solemn way, and not in a, flippant or vitriolic way. So I feel like I'm with you.
Imagine that it was your friend, Bill, who was normal up until a few weeks ago and then got infected with the zombie virus, and he murdered a few people and ate their brains. And now here he is in the courtroom clawing, and like, that's your guy, Bill. You knew him. You went bowling with him. Like, what would you feel for Bill in that moment? Like, Bill is somehow gone underneath this crazy virus that's in his brain. Like, I would feel compassion for my friend Bill that we don't have the ability to cure him of his zombieism, right? Like, if someone has a deadly disease that's going to turn them into a monster, someone has rabies, I feel compassion for them that they have rabies. That's fucking awful, right? And so if you think about this in the medical metaphor, like psychopathy as some kind of mental illness that we don't know how to cure, then compassion still plays a role for me, because you should have compassion for this person who is afflicted with this condition that we can't take away from them, because that's an awful condition to have. Not only does it make you so unsuitable for society that you have to live a life locked in a cage, but it also means that you can't develop genuine human connections with people. You can't experience love. You can't, all the things that are great about being alive, many of them are these emotional connections with other humans. You don't get those if you're a psychopath and you're viewing other humans as objects, right? So I look at a person like that and I feel immense pity for them that they're never going to get to know the kinds of joy and well-being that come from that.
I guess the only thing I'm pushing back against is I'm not even suggesting that people necessarily feel pity or compassion for any of these people, but I do not think that we should indulge in our own feelings of hatred and rage and revenge and vitriol, because I do not think that those are positive expressions of humanity, and I worry about that. Anyway,
No,
I
and
think we should move on.
they're predicated on just a false understanding of what's going on. And I just
Well,
before
sure,
we move
and I
on, there's
agree
just
with you
one more
about
point here I want to make, which is that the inhuman side of this, what I think is so interesting about the you're less than human, you're inhuman, is that if someone truly was inhuman, if this was a bear who had gotten loose and mauled a few people to death, no one would be talking about the bear who is inhuman in the way they talk about psychopaths, in the way they talk about people like Koberger, right? They talk about the bear like a wild animal or like a natural disaster, like a bear did what a bear is going to do. Like, you don't hate the bear. You take steps to prevent the bear from doing that again. And maybe that means the bear has to be put down even. Who knows? But you don't hate the bear. And so hating someone is actually a deep recognition that you consider them human and that you consider them to be on a moral plane with all the other humans around you. But if they're less than human, I feel like this is an inherent contradiction. I'm not sure how to unpack that.
Well, I unpack it in the Atlantic article, so anyone who's interested can go and check that out. Next
Which
question.
I think there's a link to that on your Substack. One other thing I'll note here is that regarding the free will side of this, Amanda does talk about free will in the Atlantic article. I know that's a very contentious side of this whole debate, but there are a few lectures that she recommends, which are on the Waking Up app that you can find in her personal playlist, which I believe is at wakingup.com/Amanda Knox.
Yep. And I also, in the Atlantic article, talk a little bit about the person who murdered my roommate, Meredith. So his name is Rudy Gaudet, and my own feelings about his, how do I think of the terms evil about him? And I also, in a new upcoming series for Waking Up, I a little bit delve into that kind of discussion. So stay tuned for that as well.
Okay, last question. This comes from Jesse. You've been to some degree a public person for almost your entire adult life. How does it feel for you now to move through the world as a person who is known and about to be even more recognizable thanks to your Hulu show? Is fame something you're conscious of on a day-to-day basis, and how have you integrated it into your sense of self?
Great question, Jesse. So being a public person, like being sort of known, not being an anonymous person.
Before you dig in, I want to just add a little note that I think is missing from this question, which is that there's a distinct difference between fame and infamy. And being known is a sort of neutral version that doesn't specify that. But in particular, you have been known through a negative vilification lens, which I think complicates all this.
I mean, yes and no, because now I'm doing a Hulu show, which is not vilifying me. But the point being that I think the more interesting question is this, going back to what Jesse was talking about, which is just the being known factor, right? Like there are those of us who can have faith that when they move through society, no one is going to recognize them. They are just a face in the crowd, and there's no chance that anyone might stumble upon them and find them like a person of interest. Just we just got back from New York and I was stopped on the street by somebody who recognized me. So like, so it isn't to say that when you are a known person, you're necessarily going to be stumbling into people who recognize you and then feel compelled to remark upon that to you. But there's always the very distinct possibility, and that whenever you enter into a public space, you are opening yourself up to being recognized and then judged by people who are not on the same playing field as you in that capacity of being known. And I mean, I've spent my entire adult life in that realm, and I've experienced the worst side of it, which is what you were bringing up, Chris, of the infamy side of it, where I am recognized within a context that has me being recognized in the worst possible light, with a spotlight that is scrutinizing me for flaws my entire adult life. And it has led to, deep, deep consequences for me, both, psychological and relational. But at the same time, it's like, as an adult person, it's also the only thing that I've really ever known as an adult, is just the constant threat of being judged and condemned, which, is
it's different than the
overwhelming.
worry of being celebrated, like sometimes people might stop you on the street and say, "Oh my God, I loved your book," which I'm sure is a great feeling to know that some stranger out there read your book and enjoyed it. And it's very different to worry that someone's recognizing you and judging you, right? And you now.
But I'm getting somewhere with this, which is that I think that even those who are relatively celebrated are still like teetering on the brink of. I still think that even those who. I think everyone who's in the public eye, whether they arrived from a celebrated place to a negative space, does in a sense have a spotlight on them that is fault finding and flaw finding. Because I think that it is absolutely true that people who are celebrated are also scrutinized, and it's almost like there is a desire, a sort of inherent human desire to tear those idols down and render them equal to us.
Well, it's a relative status
them.
thing, right? If not necessarily equal, but if Kim Kardashian looks ugly in a photo, it makes you feel better by comparison, And so,
well, anyway, so I'm working through what I'm getting at. And I would say that, like, one of the things that I'm really excited about with this Hulu series is that I'm getting the opportunity to confront my doppelganger in a real way for the first time, right? So what do I mean by that? Those who have followed my writing know that I often refer to Foxy Noxy, Luciferina, this like public idea of me that is involved in, my roommate's murder. That narrative that was made about me is this like other person who exists, who's in people's minds, and that I have to constantly interact with in this fleeting way, because it's like everywhere I go, it's like she's already been in the room before I got there. And as soon as she left, I walk in and it's just like left with this charged atmosphere that I have to like navigate, and I have to pick up her messes that she left behind. And I'm just constantly like cleaning up after this like destructive idea of me in people's minds. and it's just exhausting. It's so exhausting. And on the flip side of it, though, is that by comparison to this like nightmare version of me in people's minds, the me that I actually am is actually really fucking cool. And so like when people have a mind to be open to who I am and what I'm really like, I find that I tend to pleasantly surprise people in a big way. And so that's an interesting counterpoint to all of this. But the cool thing about the Hulu series is for the first time, I'm actually having a real hand in the creation of this doppelganger version of me that will, define, like, will carry the torch of defining who Amanda Knox is in the public imagination, so that I'm not the only one doing, like I'm not the only one who's cleaning up after the mess of Foxy Noxy. Like now Grace Van Patten is sort of like doing that and working on her rendition of Amanda Knox was a collaboration, and it meant that I got to rely also on her talent and wisdom and creativity and artfulness. And that was a really positive experience. And I'm really excited for people to see that version of me that exists in the minds of other people. And it's like that is an evolution. So for me, the thing that I'm looking forward to is that with this like new rendition of Amanda Knox that's in the eyes of the public imagination, or in that mind, when I walk into a room, the doppelganger that will have just left the room before I get in there will have been a more positive one.
It'll be Grace Van Patten, not Foxy Noxy. Yeah,
right, exactly. And I think that that's really cool. I'm still going to be in conversation with it, because I think that that's what it means to be a public person, is to be constantly in conversation and comparison to what people think about you.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if it's worth stepping into this airplane moment you had briefly a couple weeks ago when you were on your way to your sister's bachelorette party, and you noticed that someone was texting, someone in the seat in front of you, I think, was texting all their friends.
So let me explain this situation.
Yeah.
So me and my sisters are on a plane to Las Vegas for my youngest sister's bachelorette party. And we're excited, we're going to Vegas, we're a little girls trip, whatever. And me and my sister are sitting next to each other, and we're just chatting. We're just shooting. We're not loud. We're just like talking to each other. But, of course, anyone who's within a seat from us can, if they chose to, overhear our conversation. And I don't know, we're talking about like being excited about the wedding, we're not, I don't know. I mean, even, I don't know what we were talking about. Anyway, we were just talking. And I just happened to glance over. So in the aisle, so the person who was across the aisle and one seat ahead, so kind of like perfectly within my eyesight, was holding their phone, and they're just texting away to multiple people, multiple friends of theirs, just like word for word what me and my sister are saying in our conversation. Like, oh my God, Amanda Knox is on the plane with me. Here's what she's saying to her sister. Like just like going. And I was just like, oh my God, my conversation with my sister on the way to a bachelorette trip is not your content to share. Like if you had done that to any person, like if you were over here, like it was just so rude to me. It was so obviously rude to me. And she kept doing, I was waiting to see if she would stop. Like it went on for like 20 minutes. And I kept like, trying to talk to Deanna, but then glancing over me like she's still doing it. And finally, I just tapped her on the shoulder and I was like, can you please not tell all of your friends about my conversation with my sister, which is none of your business? And she was just like, oh, and she was like, oh, okay. And then just put her phone away. She was just like, did not realize that I knew exactly what she was doing. And
so I want to
it was so
bring
frustrating.
Up, you tweeted about this. You tweeted this story in a few small tweets, and the reactions to it that came in, I think, showed how the public really doesn't understand what it's like to be in your position. And there were sort of misperceptions and bad assumptions on the part of people who responded to this. Some people are like, well, you shouldn't be talking on your phone. It's like, well, you weren't on a phone. Or you shouldn't be talking loud. Well, you weren't loud. Or, well, hey, tough nuts, you're a public figure. You shouldn't be talking about private things in public if you don't want people to overhear them. And it's like, well, it wasn't really a private,
I'm not saying that she couldn't overhear them. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
right?
in a, people talk on a plane, and if people overhear you, fine. The next step, though, is telling all of your friends like about it on your phone. Like you wouldn't do that.
Well, and then other people were like, well, you're just as guilty. What a hypocrite. You're looking at her private text messages, and to which I think it's like, well, look, your eyes glance all around a plane, and like as you're on your way to the bathroom, you're going to see that so-and-so
and if you
in
see
seat
your
24
own
is,
name,
yeah,
if you see your own name on some stranger's phone, you're going to look. I'm sorry. Like, Amanda Knox is here on my plane. Like, if I see that, I'm not just going to be like, oh, my bad, I'm invading her privacy. Like, no. Like, so.
But nonetheless, you do exist in this space where you have to anticipate that something like that could happen. And as much as you might wish that someone would just be a little chiller and, if she does recognize you, like, what are the appropriate ways for this woman to act? One is to say, oh, hi, is that you, Amanda? Wow, nice to meet you. And just,
I think
that's a thing
I
to
would
do.
way prefer that.
Yeah.
I would way prefer if somebody recognizes me and is struck enough by the fact that I'm in their presence that they have to text all of their friends about it, that they just like acknowledge me as a human being instead of weirdly eavesdrop and like text their friends about me and my sister. Like that bothers me. My sister is not a public person, and so her private conversation is also being relayed by this person, and that's not fair. And it's
not that interesting of a conversation. The only thing that makes it interesting is that it's you.
Yes, and it bothers me because like also me relaying to Twitter that this happened, I did not name who this person was. I didn't know who this person was because they are a stranger. That is also the difference. Like she knew who I was, I didn't know who she was. Not the same. The expectation of how you interact with the person, not the same. You are not on an even playing field. And I don't know, I think that people really glorify what it means to be like known without really understanding. Like basically what I felt like the response that people gave to me was, well, you should have just been on a private plane then, because if you really want to be private, then you should just like not ever be around other people.
Don't talk at all. Don't talk at all.
Don't speak. Just be silent on your sister's bachelorette party, vacation weekend. And don't go on your little sister's bachelorette party weekend because someone might see you at the Magic Mike, show and post about. And it's like, I've lived in my life that way where I lived that I was not allowed, like I did not. The advice that I got from lawyers was do not go outside. Do not go out in public. People will videotape you and then they'll sell that videotape and use it against you. And you cannot afford to be viewed in the worst possible light. So I'm sorry. I know you're a 25-year-old and that you would love to go to that karaoke night at the bar, but you can't. And
this is when you were on trial the second time and facing extradition. Yeah.
And I don't want to live like that. I want to live in a world where there's more respect for other people's right to live their life. And I just wish that more people would have understanding and respect for that.
So, I mean, maybe the reason to talk about this is that in the hopes of helping sway people in the way they react to public figures. Because I know one thing that you've also really objected to is when people say things to you like, oh, well, you didn't ask for the spotlight, but, these other, actresses or whoever, they've been seeking out that attention. And so, they deserve to have the paparazzi essentially trail them around at the grocery store. It's like,
Yeah,
no,
I don't like that either.
That's also not cool, right? Even if it is something that you can expect. So the fact that you have to anticipate that people might eavesdrop on your conversation and text their friends about it, yeah, you do have to anticipate that. Does that mean that it's a good thing that people do? No. People should not do that, right? But I think
and honestly, takes me out of my ability to be present in the moment with my family and friends, because I don't want to live in a state of paranoia that someone is going to dehumanize me and violate my pride, my ability to be present with my family and friends because, anyway. So to answer
to just bring it back
question,
around to the integrated into sense of self. Yeah.
Yeah. So when it comes to the sense of self part, there's you as a person, and then there's the you that is an idea of a person in other people's minds. And those things are related and impact each other. Like who I am as a real person and what I do in the real world does impact the version of me that's in the public imagination, and the version of me that's in the public imagination has an impact on what I am able to do and whether or not I'm able to be taken seriously or what kind of jobs I can get. Like all of that is integrated, but it's not the same. And I think it's really important to always be reminded of how they are related but not the same. And that's where I get a feeling of that's how I stabilize my sense of self. Is there's the me that is present in the moment, who is literally existing with not like an image of me between me and the things that I'm interacting with. And then there's this extra meta level of existence where that echo of me is sort of moving around and interacting with people's minds. And my hope, my goal is that version of me that is out there on that meta level is having a positive impact on people's minds. Like, I love the idea that I don't necessarily personally have to have a relationship with somebody or a conversation with somebody to have a positive impact in their life. And that's been the sort of gratifying experience of like writing my book, or I'm hoping that people will come away from the series with a similar thing, is that even if they don't, like, I don't have the ability to have all of the conversations that I could possibly have with people in the world who are like having a hard time or are struggling with their identity. Like, I'm just one person. But the idea of Amanda is not just one person. And that's the power and the really cool thing about being known, is that the thing that is known can serve as a balm or as a friend to somebody who you might never actually interact with in person. And I really like that idea, that like something I say or something I do in a public way would resonate with somebody and make them feel just a little bit better about their own existence. Like, that's a really cool gift that I don't take for granted.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for connecting with us here and asking Amanda anything. Again, if you want to reach out, you can submit your questions and comments through amandaknox.substack.com or through amandaknox.com, and we will prioritize questions from subscribers. And please do consider checking out the Substack. Amanda's posting essays there every week, along with ad-free versions of all the Hard Knocks episodes. And we hope to see you there.
All right. I'm going to go take a nap now. Ciao, everybody.